Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I am just so moved to introduce you to Ben and Jenna Jury, co-authors of Faith Actually, Living Life After Tragedy. Ben and Jenna met while attending Central Bible College and have been married for 8 years. Ben was a member of the United States Navy, where he was given the Navy Achievement Medal for superior service and duties. Jenna earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Biblical Studies from Indiana Wesleyan University. They served as associate pastors for 2 years, have 2 biological daughters, and plan on adopting a little boy from Vietnam soon. You can visit their website, thepeacefulnest.org, for more information. Ben and Jenna Jury, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Ben, before we get into this story of loss, of grief, of support, of your personal journey, and almost really 2 visits of the same journey with 2 different outcomes. Before we get into that, take me back to, Ben, your faith upbringing. Who were the influences in your life? What helped shape you to become the believer and the man, and why you were attending a Bible college? What prompted that? What was the influence for that?
Well, I'm from Mexico, Missouri. I grew up under the preaching of my grandfather, who's a 42, 43-year Assembly of God minister in an old church in Mexico. And as a kid, I didn't really take it serious. I got baptized and, just kind of went on about the kid stuff and didn't care about high school. My goals were to get out of high school. So I got out of high school and I joined the military. I was living the military crazy life and not wanting anything to do with God. And little did I know, behind the scenes, as he was going before me, my goals were to re-enlist, but his goals were different. So I got out. The desires and passions of my heart changed. One Sunday night, as I was driving to church, the Lord pretty much said, "Hey, you're going to Bible college." Got to church that night. Quit smoking. Haven't smoked since then. Been 12 years cold turkey. Rededicated my life to the Lord, and my grandpa has been just a huge influence in my life. If it wasn't for him, I can pretty much with confidence say I wouldn't be sitting here. So the Lord has been working out my path and ordering my steps, and went to Bible college and met Jenna, and then here we are.
All right, and Jenna, what was your story?
I grew up in Assembly of God Church. Ever since I was little, we started going when I was 2, me and my brothers and my parents. And I remember going to church every Sunday night, every Wednesday. So I grew up knowing who the Lord was. After high school, I went to Bible college to get my Biblical Studies degree. And I ended up taking a detour after I met Ben, but I finally got that a couple years ago in 2016.
Okay, and the detour was marriage and children.
Marriage.
The detour was me.
Was Ben. We got married in 2010, and then in 2011 we got pregnant, and we started trying for a family.
So, what was it that drew the 2 of you together? What was it you saw in each other? I always love to hear the love story, because usually there's something, I see you laughing, usually there's a comical aspect and you've been waiting to tell it and nobody's really asked you about it. So you get a chance to tell it here on Revealing the Truth.
First, or do you want to tell mine?
I'll tell mine. I apologize to my brother-in-law in advance. I was in my dorm room up on the 2nd floor one day in college, and I looked out my window, and Jenna was fighting with this man outside of the car, like arguing.
Arguing, not fighting.
I'm like, she needs to get rid of that guy. And if I come to find out, it was her brother. So she can't get rid of her brother, and they were just arguing a sibling rivalry. So, and then I kept my eye on her, and then I sent her a Facebook message asking how she's doing or something, and then here we are. But I'll let you tell. She tells it better.
No, well, it's actually funny because when I first started CBC as a freshman, I started dating another guy, and I honestly don't really remember his name. And I remember sitting in chapel one day. It was probably October, November, And Ben walked in, and I was always in the back, and he goes straight through the aisleway to the front, and he's shaking everybody's hands, and he's talking to everyone because that's who he is. And I just remember thinking, I need to date a guy like him. And he doesn't believe me, but I honestly, I felt like the Lord was telling me, you're gonna marry him one day. And here we are. We got married.
Two totally different stories.
And I didn't know he was stalking me outside his dorm room. I really didn't know that.
So when you finally heard the story of him and that encounter of seeing you in the discussion,
Yeah.
when you connected all that together, did that feel more like a God thing, or more like, this guy's a stalker?
No, honestly, it felt like a God thing. It really did. I don't remember what I was arguing with my brother about at all, but it did.
This may sound kind of odd to you, Rabbi, but I didn't do that well at high school at all. I got a 1.7 GPA and did horrible. Went to college. First few semesters was doing 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, whatever. I had a desire to be there. The second I met her, all desire to be there was gone. It was like the Lord brought us to college together to meet, and it was really weird. So, and now here we are.
Well, I completely understand that. I was not a great student myself, and so I didn't want to be where I was, and so I wound up being shipped off to a boarding school, which was where I wanted to be, and wound up going on to college and pursuing a corporate career. So I do completely understand that dynamic. So the two of you get married, and your story begins to unfold. Did you court? Did you date? What was that process like for you?
So we started dating in March of 2009. Well, we knew each other. We officially started dating in March, and then we got engaged in August. And it was quick. A lot of people said it was really quick. But the women in my family, like my grandma, she met her husband, and they got married. My grandpa, they got married 3 months later, and they had a marriage of 51 years. It had its trials, but it was a happy marriage. And my mom and dad dated for, I think it was 8 months, and then they got married. And so I wasn't trying to replicate that, but I didn't see an issue with just knowing that he was the one for me. So we got married a year later. So we got married in August, or we got engaged in August, and we got married in June of 2010.
And to go with that, I was in college at 25 because I was in the military for a while, and I was older than most people there, and I knew what I wanted, and when I found it, I knew it was it. So that helps a lot too, And the Lord kind of gave us both, hey, you guys are meant to be, so why not get married,
And the families got along. Families still get along.
Yes,
yeah,
our families get along. They love each other, and from the time my mom, because that was my mom and dad met Ben, I was a little nervous because they met him after we got engaged. So it's like, oh wait, you've only been dating for 3 months, but they love him, and his family is very loving and accepting towards me, and we all get along.
Well,
and it's really nice.
The military training paid off when I met her dad, so.
No.
I'm kidding.
He's trying to be funny.
I understand. So did you talk about children? Did you talk about building a family? Did you two craft your ideal vision for what family was going to look like, what vocation was going to look like, direction? Were you pretty much on the same page in that area?
Yeah, we were. When I grew up, I always envisioned me having a large family. I always had the desire to have 4 to 5 children, and 2 boys and 2 girls. And so when I talked to Ben about having children, he was on board too, and we wanted to start right away.
And And I love to fish. If I could do it for a living, I would. And I love baseball. So I was excited. We found out we're having a boy. I was thrilled to death. I'm like, I got somebody to fish with and play baseball with. So
Yeah.
So you're married in 2010. Your best friend, you describe him as funny, smart, and one of the hardest working men you know. In 2011, you conceived your first child, a boy, and they gave you a due date of March the 12th, 2012 as the due date. And joy,
Yeah.
ecstasy, you were elated, you were thinking about fishing and baseball. What thoughts were you having when you heard the news you were going to have a son?
I was just excited. I was unsure of what we were going to have, but I was excited for Ben because I knew he wanted a boy really bad. And I was just happy for either gender.
Okay, so what happened after that?
So I had a very normal pregnancy up until about 27 weeks. Actually, it was up until about 25 weeks. And then I developed extreme swelling. And I know that in pregnancy, it was my first pregnancy, so I was unsure of everything, but I knew that the amount of swelling that I had was not normal. My mom was very concerned because she had preeclampsia with my oldest brother. It was later in her pregnancy, and then I remember going for Thanksgiving in 2011 and visiting his family in Missouri. And his mom and his grandma and some ladies at the church were very concerned because my legs, I couldn't fit into my shoes. And they were just like, you need to go see your doctor. So I went and I didn't have any other symptoms. And she's like, I think you're fine. It's just normal swelling. And about 2 weeks later, I ended up going on a trip to the ER because I developed some symptoms because of high blood pressure. And I was in the stroke range of having high blood pressure. And they found out that I had full-blown preeclampsia, and they sent me to the city right away. And because of my preeclampsia, our son was growth restricted. So he wasn't developing the way he should have been in my womb. So at that point, he was around 1 pound, 9 ounces.
and for me that was scary because I was ignorant to what the size of a premature baby was. I had in my mind, smaller, bigger. He was a Barbie doll that fit in my hand, basically. But he was 100% fully developed, which
Yes.
goes to speak toward how awesome and unique God is. A baby that small is fully developed. So
Yeah.
that's when the beginning of our trial of our faith really started.
So, what were you, from a faith perspective? Of course, you've involved the family, you've talked it over with both sides of the family, they know what's going on, they're equally as concerned. You come from a pastoral background, and a Pentecostal background. So, I'm a Pentecostal, charismatic, spirit-filled Jew. I know what kind of response my team would have. Did you get that kind of support from the faith community, rallied around you, intercessors, prayer meetings, people interceding for you, people coming to your aid? What was the support like during this diagnosis and then the premature delivery of your child?
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because we were new to the faith. Well, I was, because I remember I said I rededicated. But I grew up in a Holy Ghost filled church. I've literally seen my grandfather, and no glory to him, it's the glory of God. I've literally seen my grandfather lay hands on a man and be healed from AIDS. And I kept in my mind, Lord, I need a miracle. Where are you? Where are you? My wife's hurting, my son's hurting. If you're going to be faithful in my life, now's the time to do it. Please come through for me. And I just kept on quoting scripture. I kept on, you know, I've seen you heal people from cancer. I've seen AIDS. I've seen this all. You're a faithful God. I kept on reminding myself He's faithful. And I called my grandfather on the phone, and he just kept on encouraging me. He said, "Son, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." He prayed for me. We called our pastor back then. He prayed for us, and it was just the support system from the church was incredible, and we just appreciate it.
Yeah. And So we had a lot, like you asked if there was a lot of people praying for us, prayer warriors. We had our church family. My sister-in-law's from India, so she had her father, she had called him, and his church was praying for us, and people in Florida that we knew, just all over, were interceding for us and David. And to be honest, because of my faith journey and the fact that I grew up in church, I really did not believe that anything bad was going to happen to us. Even though I knew my diagnosis, I knew he was going to be born early. I didn't think he was going to die. I believed that God was going to deliver him and he would have a wonderful story, testimony to the beginning of his life. And so my faith, during that time, I was still believing that the Lord was going to do a miracle, the way that I wanted it to be. If you know what I mean.
And not only that, not from a faith standpoint, but just from a man standpoint, I knew that I had to be strong for my wife. I didn't have any answers. I didn't know what to do, but I just knew that I had to pray, hold her hand, and be there for her, and just keep on believing. She was relying on my confidence and my faith to help get her through as well.
So you're in this day to day. David is delivered premature at 27 weeks, 40 weeks being full term. So 13 weeks premature, and he was how big at birth?
1 pound 9 ounces and 12.5 inches long.
Okay, and so the neonatologists are all involved, and they're providing the best possible support they can. You're able to be in there and have physical contact, which is actually a modern concept. In the 50s, when I was born, you were isolated. They didn't know that human touch and contact, and so were you there most of the time there at the hospital?
Yeah, so I stayed from when I was sent to the hospital, it was a Friday. So I was there and they delivered him on Monday, and then I stayed in the hospital with him until Friday. They let me go. But we came back every day, and I was in the NICU with him all day long. Ben came up every day, and he was there. My family, we were able to hold his hand. We weren't allowed to hold him because he was in an incubator. He was still so little, but we could reach in and touch his hand. And he held Ben's finger, and yeah, we were there constantly until Friday. I left, and I came back. I left during the day. I came right back Friday evening, and then I came back Saturday morning, and then on Sunday.
It was also winter time as well. It was December 12th, and they were worried about the flu, so they just took him and instantly took him away from us just because of his immune system. They want to make sure he was going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's typical of premature babies born that early. They took him and they took him straight to the NICU. So I was allowed to see him right after he was born. Ben went straight with him to the NICU while they prepped him and got him in the incubator. And then after he was in the incubator, they brought him back so I could see him.
Okay, so they roll the incubator into your room, so he's there with you there, and you're able to spend time with him.
Just for a second, and then he had to go to the NICU, and when I had to go from my room to the NICU to see him.
If you can imagine, there was a lot of urgency going on, so everything was, here's your son, see ya,
Right.
So,
over the course of the next couple of days, were there moments of hope? Were there moments of fear? Were there moments of worry? Were there moments where you felt isolated, alone, questioning, doubting, fearful? What was your level in confidence on the faith meter? Where were you resting? Were you pegged out on Lord, how could you do this to me? Or were you pegged out on Lord, we're believing for a miracle? Or were you just kind of center line?
Rabbi, to be honest, I was center line, but I was also believing for a miracle. And I was telling myself, be strong, be confident. She needs you. Don't let her show you see weakness, which is completely wrong in a guy. It's okay to be weak. But yeah, I was pegged out, and it's crazy because Jen and I never listened to the radio ever. We listened to CDs or songs on our phone or whatever. we're driving home that day from the hospital, and I turned the radio on, and I forget who sings it, but there's a Christian song, and the guy said one of the main lyrics was "Everything's gonna be okay," and it was like just blew my mind. It was just the Lord went before us and just happened to order our steps to where we turned on the radio and that song was playing, and it was crazy. And I was just trying to hold on to my faith because I knew that God was going to be faithful. Not everything always looks as though He will be faithful, but He always brings things to work toward our favor, and He's faithful.
Yeah.
So, Jenna, David lived 6 days.
Yes.
Were you there with him when he passed?
Yes. So Sunday morning, I woke up. You asked about our faith meter. During those 6 days, I was on the Lord's going to perform a miracle. We have a sign that sits above our couch, or it was sitting above our couch, it's somewhere else now. It says, God's will never take you. The will of God will never take you, or the grace of God will not protect you. And so I kept repeating that throughout the whole journey. On Sunday morning, I woke up with just a knot in the pit of my stomach. Like I didn't really feel sick. I felt sick in the sense that I felt like something bad was going to happen.
Unsettled, uneasy.
Uneasy. I was just uneasy all morning. We went to church, and I called the hospital, and David was doing good because we called him every day, every couple hours, or I don't even know if it was a couple hours. It's like every hour we called to see how he was doing. And later, we decided to go. We had to wait for my mom, and I believe that was the Lord, because if we had gone when we planned on going, chances are we wouldn't have been there when David passed. But we waited on my mom because she really wanted to go with us. And so we went up there. And while we were driving up there, the doctor called me. And he said that something was going on with David's heart rate had gone down. And they were a little concerned about an infection, but they weren't that concerned. They were going to do insert a catheter into I believe it was his head, to try to drain. I don't remember the words that he said, but when he called me and I heard that message, I was back to unsettled. I remember looking at my mom, and she was like, it's going to be okay, because she believed too that everything was going to be fine. So we go in there, we saw him, and he had his eyes open. And when I saw his eyes open, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm just, because he was so early, maybe it's just me, and we stayed for a couple hours, and then the doctor, it's funny. My mom left. It's not funny, but my mom left to go get a drink, and Ben left to go take his dad to the bus station because he was leaving. And so I was there by myself, and I was holding David's hand, and the doctor came up to me and was like, asked me to please step over by the wall because they were going to try to insert the catheter. And I started feeling uneasy again. I went and sat there, and 15 minutes goes by, and more doctors and nurses start swarming his incubator. And at that moment, I just knew something was wrong. And I had a nurse come up to me, and she said, "Are you here alone?" She kept looking at me during this whole thing, and she finally came up to me and said, "Are you alone?" I said, "No, my mom's here with me and my husband." And she said, "I suggest you go get them right now, because David was down. He had died, and we were able to bring him back. But it doesn't look good from here on out. And you need to go get somebody to be with you." And then she asked me if we wanted to baptize him. So I went and got my mom started coming through the doors, and she was with me, and then the nurse waited for Ben. And so I was alone, but we were with David, and he hadn't passed when they were there. My dad came up, and he lived for a couple hours after this, but they were able to unhook him and give him to us so we could hold him and be there with him when he passed.
Which is the first time we got to hold him ever.
It was the first time we got to hold him, and we went to they gave us a hospital room so we could be in a private area with nobody around, because when all this was going on, they were very considerate. They put up a curtain around his incubator so nobody would be looking in on us. And finally they moved us when we had decided to unplug him, or he actually made that decision himself. And we went to the room and held him when he passed away. And I just remember feeling numb, completely numb that night, and angry.
We're talking with Ben and Jenna Jury, author of Faith Actually, Living Life After Tragedy. The tragedy being the loss of their 6-year-old son, David. The story is not just their story. The story is shared 90,000 times every year, as every year in the United States, 90,000 children die before their first birthday. It's wonderful that they had family to be near them, and they had a faith family to support them. But imagine those that do not have that relationship with God, or can even be at this point, several years later, to go public with this story, to offer words of encouragement that God is faithful even when we can't see it, and that God sustains us even in the hardest of trials, and yet we can put our trust in Him even in the natural when we suffer this kind of loss. It is incomprehensible. It is inconceivable unless you have lost a child yourself to even understand, to even have empathy for what Ben and Jenna have been through. But their story doesn't end there. As a matter of fact, their story begins there, and actually there's a continuation because there's a repeat. But the repeat has a different outcome. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that repeat, and then we're going to talk about how do you endure? How do you praise God even in the worst of times, when you know that there's an enemy out there to lie, to kill, to destroy, to rob you of everything that mattered to you? How can you now still, at this point, we cannot bring David back, but we can still praise the one that made him and called him home? A test of their faith, but even more a test of your faith, because what would you do? And would you be sitting here right now telling this story and have written a book called Faith Actually, being willing to share with the world the grief and the need for support for families who are grieving through the loss of a child who passes before their first birthday? We're going to take a short break, and we'll rejoin Ben and Jenna Jury right after these announcements. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Ben and Jenna Jury, authors of Faith Actually, Living Life After Tragedy, the tragedy of the loss of their 6-day-old son, David. Jenna, Ben, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I made a statement to you offline that said that your victory is really in your response to the circumstances that we face in life. Do we take tragedy and wallow in the tragedy, turn our backs on God and walk the other way, because what kind of God would allow a 6-day-old baby to die? But your family rallied together in faith, and 6 months later, Jenna, you're pregnant.
Yep. Yep, I'm pregnant and I'm scared, fearful. Yeah. Completely different experience than when I got pregnant with David. This time I wasn't naive to what could happen. I believed when we got pregnant with David that you get past the 12-week mark and you're home free. You get to bring home a healthy, happy baby. And with this pregnancy, when I found out, I was excited, but I was scared. So scared.
Ben, how did you feel?
We were thinking, here we go again, you know? I'll just be honest, we were. And but there was a lady in our church and our pastor at David's funeral that spoke a word of prophecy into our life. And he told us, no more affliction will rise up against you again. And at that moment, Rabbi, is when I learned to rely on the power of a spoken blessing. When someone speaks a prophecy into your life, it's going to happen. It has to happen. So I just kept on relying on that prophecy. I said, here we go again, but no, it's going to be a different outcome, different results.
But yet, preeclampsia set in again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So here we are thinking no more affliction, but then here's preeclampsia, and it happened at 27 weeks. And I was seeing a high risk doctor, so he knew what to look out for. He's a wonderful doctor, and he knew what to help me. Uh, and but at this time, I had to be sent to the city again. But we believed, and we had so many people praying for us that this time was going to be different. Well, I will be honest with you. Ben believed. I was still very fearful. I was angry. I was hurt. I was working through my faith with God, and I had to lean on my husband and those around me uh, a lot, so much, and to God, and eventually was able to get to the point where I could lean on God and His promises throughout this.
And most of the time when you have a tragedy in your life, the last thing you want to do is cling on to God. You're blaming God. But that's the first thing I did. I said, here we go. Come through, God.
Yeah.
And so how did that turn out?
So it turned out with us having a beautiful 5-year-old girl now. Her name is Brooklyn. At the beginning of Brooklyn's story, I got pregnant. We were fearful. At 27 weeks, I developed preeclampsia like I did with her big brother. And I was sent to the city, and I was on hospital bed rest for 4 weeks. And during that time is when I walked through my faith with God. I just clung to Him. I learned to trust in Him again. And I remember I had a doctor that would come in and see me. When you're in the city and at a hospital, you have doctors, they round. You'd see a different one every day. They come in maybe once a week, the same ones. And so the first time I saw this doctor, I'd been there for a few days, and he named out my list of symptoms. The only thing I had was one thing. I had protein. I didn't have high blood pressure. I didn't have swelling. It was different symptoms than with David. And so I was to stay in bed, not get up, not do anything unless I had to go to the bathroom or shower. I had to sit on a stool. That's what I did for 4 weeks, because our goal was to keep Brooklyn inside and get her as far as possible to 40 weeks as we could. So when he came in, he read off the list, and in kind of a nonchalant way, he said, so we're basically just waiting for you to get sick. And I said, well, I'm not going to get sick. Everything's going to be fine. And he said, no, you will. You'll get sick. It's just a matter of when. 4 weeks later, he comes in, he's kind of like, he reads the list of symptoms again, and he's like, why aren't you getting sick? I don't understand this. I said, it's God. At that point in my life, 4 weeks later, I was able to look him in the eye and say, this is God. God is the one that's keeping Brooklyn inside, and He's showing us how miraculous He is and how much He loves us. And we delivered her at 32 weeks. The reason was because she had her, and you will have to read the story. It's miraculous the way that God protected her life. But she had umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, so that's why we delivered her. And 32 weeks, she was 2 pounds 12 ounces, and she spent 4 weeks in the NICU. Now she's beautiful, wonderful, smart little girl. She just loves the Lord, and she loves life. And I look at her every day, and it's just a testament to God's faithfulness.
And Rabbi, looking back on it, this is the Holy Ghost, because God was doing a miracle. It's funny. One Sunday morning, I was at the altar at church, and I was just laying into God. I was like, "Here we go again, God. You're unfaithful. Whatever." And I just stopped praying and I listened. And God said, "This is for my glory. Wait and see what I'll do." So I got up. I went outside of church. I called my wife. "Babe, you wouldn't believe what the Lord just told me." And her response to me was, "You won't believe what the Lord just told me. He told us exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. Both of us." And I'm an hour away. She's in Cincinnati Hospital. I'm an hour away. Boom. And here we are. It was pretty cool.
Jenna, you write, it took us 2 years to write Faith, actually. I wanted to scrap it so many times. In this book, both Ben and I allow ourselves to be vulnerable and real as a Christian couple who both grew up in church, love the Lord, believe that good things happen to those who love Him. As a Christian couple who are launched into deep waters of grief and death, not knowing where God was. I turned away from God. Ben clung to him. Neither one of us were wrong in how we grieved. We wrote the book because we want to shed light on child loss in the Christian community as well as society in general. We want to offer hope and encouragement to those who have lost a loved one, to those who may be questioning God. You share this story of living life after tragedy, Faith Actually, and your mission is to bring awareness to the lack of support that there is. Ben, I told you before we went on the air that I was thrilled that you were here because men are the most marginalized part of society when it comes to child loss. Men are 100% marginalized when it comes to abortion recovery. There are very few men that ever go through abortion recovery, and for every abortion, there is a man involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There cannot be a man impacted by not be impacted by an abortion, but yet there are few programs, if any. So bringing awareness to the fact that 90,000 children each year in the United States die. I'm going to make an assumption to say that's 90,000 families, one per family. That there could be multiples, but one per family. 90,000 families per year. That means over the last 10 years, that's almost 1 million people impacted. Then when you have the peripheral family, you have the in-laws, the grandparents, the siblings, and all that, you're talking about millions of people who are impacted by this every year, and we don't hear anything. We don't see programs. Now, I teach at a church that happens once a month. They have, I think it's called Compassionate Friends. And it is a group that gets together, shares, they've all lost a child. And they understand that the Bible is not the handbook for child loss. How many lost a child in the Bible? Very few. So we don't really have the guidelines for what our response is, or the guidelines. We see that when Jacob heard that Joseph was dead, he went into mourning, sackcloth and ashes, and rent his clothes. There was no other response other than deep grief and complete surrender and brokenness. We see God had the same response when Jesus died. He rent the curtain in two. He tore the curtain from top to bottom, the only garment, the veil, that separated man from God. That's the response, is grief. He even gave the design for the priestly robe to be reinforced at the collar so that the priest couldn't tear it to ever show mourning. That's how much we've learned societally and biblically to hide behind a mask. And you two have come forward and said, we're not going to wear a mask. We had a loss. It was tragic. And there is a way to get through this and navigate this and still give God the glory. All right? Ben, how do you handle this on a regular basis when you talk to groups of people and they ask you to share your story? What's the message? What's the takeaway that you want a man, all right, talking to the male who is marginalized? He doesn't know how to give comfort to his wife, let alone even acknowledge his own grief. He feels inadequate. He feels like he failed. He feels like there's nothing he could do, so he is really at the bottom of the whole rung. He is nobody. He can do nothing. He's helpless. He's hopeless. He can't say the right thing, can't do the right thing. He can't fix it. All right? That sums up our total sense of inadequacy, and there's nothing I can do to fix this problem. Yet here you are sitting here on international television, live, sharing the glory of God and the faith in God, that God is the God who restores, God who's the God who redeems. How do you offer comfort to men, and what encouragement can you give them to speak about it, to be in front of a camera and say, my heart was broken. I didn't know what to do, and that was okay.
It is okay. Rabbi, you pretty much said everything I was going to say, but I will say this. In the hospital room, there was nothing I could do. There's no words of comfort I could give my wife. I was completely helpless. As a man, I felt like I failed myself. I somehow felt like I failed God. Rabbi, I was repenting of sins I had repented of a long time ago, just religious stuff. Uh, I felt like I failed my son. I felt like I failed my entire family. I felt like completely helpless, just complete failure. And I just especially felt like I wasn't good enough for God. You do a miracle for everybody else, but you won't do one for me. And it crushed my confidence. Jenna spoke about it earlier when she met me in college. I was headstrong, confident. Went through this trial and just crushed my confidence. But as day went on and day by day, I got in my prayer closet. My confidence slowly built back up, and my trust in the Lord slowly began to heal. And as a man, I want other men to know that it's okay to be weak, be vulnerable. Let your wife know that it hurts. Let somebody know that it's okay. I mean, I think sometimes as men, we turn to work, we turn to other things to occupy our minds. Take time just to slow down and just realize that, hey, babe, I'm hurting. Can you help me? It's okay to ask for help, and I've done it many times. And it's okay to ask the Lord for help. He's there to help you. He will help you. So,
You know, being strong doesn't mean being a tough guy.
Absolutely.
Being strong means being transparent. And for men who are watching this program right now that have suffered loss, whether or not it's through abortion, through the loss of your own child, or even the knowledge of someone who has lost a child, a hug from another man. The Bible says to greet your brother with a holy kiss. You may not have the words, but just that hug, just that presence, just that comfort, just that saying, I'm here for you, is going to make a world of difference in someone's life. Jenna.
Just be a real person to them, hey, I really care,
Jenna, what resources are there out there that you've been able to find, or what have you found as a lack of resources in this area for these 90,000 families a year that go through this? You would think this would be a pretty large support system out there, and every church large enough to have a support group would have support. What did you find out there when you began to look for your support?
I found very little in the tangible society. Online, there is a lot more support. I believe that the statistics of women, well, and you have to think about it, men too, because there's always a man involved, like you said, 1 in 4. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 4 men, granted if they're, separate men, lose a child, whether it's miscarriage, stillbirth, die before their first birthday. That is somebody because we know more than 4 people. So somebody who has lost a child. They may not tell you. You might not know at all. There's several people in our friends and family that came up to us at David's funeral and told us, we too lost a child. She was a year old when she passed away. We too lost a child. He was 3 months old when he passed away. We had no idea. And when I started looking for my support and somebody to I needed somebody to talk to, I was able to find they told me to go to my doctor and find a counselor. And there are counselors out there who do specialize in grief. I believe, though, that there needs to be people who specialize in child loss and just somebody that understands, or maybe not even has been through it, but just knows what the unique circumstances are, knows what the unique needs are when it comes to child loss, because it's so abnormal, not abnormal, but it's so, abnormal in the sense that a child is not supposed to die before their parents. I imagine that it would be David burying me when he was 40, 50 years old, not the other way around. And there's a lack of support, I believe, also in society and in the Christian community when it comes to understanding what a grieving family is going through that has lost a child. We had so many well-meaning Christians come up to us and tell us that God needed another angel, or it was at least you can get pregnant, or at least he's not suffering. Those are not helpful. Just being able to just trying to fill the space with words is not helpful. And that's what I think our goal and in writing this book and putting it out there as a resource is to just show families and people who have gone through it that there are others that do relate to you. The statistics are high, and there are people who care out there, and God cares. And I would say that there is some resources, like I said, online and stuff, but there needs to be more. As you said, there's 90,000 babies pass away before their first birthday. And if you are able to have a grief group geared towards child loss, it should be a necessity. Really should.
In your website, thepeacefulnest.org, you offer some resources, and you offer yourself as somebody you can contact as one who can offer support or direction to get some support. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate both of you being on here to share not the tragedy, right, but the grace of God, the mercy of God. You have two beautiful children now. You're working to adopt another child. I have an adopted child. It's a wonderful experience. What you're doing and putting yourselves out there, being transparent, is a testimony to the fact that God can trust you, to carry forward the message that even in the darkest of times, God's still at work. Even in the worst of situations, God's still at work. And we don't understand. And anybody that tells you they understand why God would take a 6-day-old child is blowing a lot of smoke, because there is nothing in our natural mind that can comprehend or justify or that we can explain other than in this fallen world and in this fallen situation, this happens. Maybe we document it more today than it was documented in the past. Maybe it's a common occurrence. Maybe it's not a common occurrence. The point is that you both found your own way back to God and find your comfort and your peace and your rest in the knowledge that David is there with the Lord, that this is not the end, this is the beginning, and that if you can offer help to one other family, even one other family, to help walk them through this tragedy, to let them know there is life after tragedy, that you are offering your hands out there and saying, grab a hold of our hands because we know what it's like. And at least we can offer you the comfort of saying we've been there when many other people cannot. Then I commend you for that, and I would encourage our audience to support this. Faith Actually, Ben and Jenna Jury, Living Life After Tragedy. The website is thepeacefulnest.org. I want to encourage you to support their work, their ministry for child loss and grief. Faith Actually Ministry. They give you a list of grief resources. They do a podcast. They talk about this, and they offer themselves to support you. Encourage them as they encourage others. These are the kind of important matters we want to talk about here on Revealing the Truth. Ben and Jenna Jury, thank you for blessing us with your story, and may God bless all the works of your hands.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.